One more concept I wanted to tell you about before we left this introductory module is the concept of an assembly reference. Now, we've already talked about assemblies, and we've talked about how when we do a build in Visual Studio, each of the projects that is in our solution is going to build into an assembly. So an assembly is a container. It contains all of the types that we've defined and all of the code that we've written. It's inside that assembly. If someone else wanted to use the functionality that we've created, we'd have to give them that assembly, and they'd have to add a reference to that assembly into their project. That gives them access to all the things that we've written inside of there. The framework class libraries themselves are broken up into several dozen assemblies. They contain all the features that Microsoft has given us to use with .NET, but we don't have a reference to all of the assemblies that make up the framework class library in our project. A project typically is only going to start with the bare minimum number of assemblies that it needs to get started with, and then as you add functionality and branch into different areas, chances are you're going to need to go out and add a reference to other framework class libraries, to those assemblies, or maybe to a third-party assembly that someone else has written. It's also quite common in a large solution that is made up of many projects that you need to add references between projects inside of your solution so that you can share code between projects. One easy way to see what is inside of the assemblies that you have referenced is to use a tool called the Object Browser. Let me bring up the Object Browser in Visual Studio. It's under the View menu and select Object Browser. What we have here is a list of all the assemblies that are currently referenced by our project and the assembly that's going to be produced by our project itself. You can also see these references in the Solution Explorer window under that References tab. If you open that up, you can see we have a reference to the system assembly, to the system.core assembly, and to the system.xml assembly, and a few others. Every .NET application is also going to have a reference to MS Core Lib. That is just sort of implied. That is the bare minimum that you need to be executing .NET code. If we click to expand this is a tree view. What we're seeing now is all of the different namespaces that are inside of this assembly. So there's a system.io namespace, and there's also just a system namespace. In our application, in our assembly, we have a Hello World VS assembly that has a Hello World VS namespace, and there you can see our program. That's where our main method was. So this middle window here is going to list all of the methods that are available on this type, this class called program. And here was class 1. That was the empty class that we just added to demonstrate how Visual Studio maps things to the file system. Let's go back to the system namespace in MS Core Lib and open that up and see what's inside. One thing you can find in here is the int32 and int64 types. And you can see all the methods that are available on those. You can also find the console type that we were using. And inside of here you can see that console has a readline method. That's the method that we were invoking to read a key, a line from the console, so that someone had to type something before our program would exit. And you can see there's an extensive number of types just inside of the system namespace of MS Core Lib. And there's a couple dozen namespaces inside of here that you can browse. And by the time you go through the entire framework class library, again, you'll find thousands and thousands of types. If you want to get to some of these other types and the functionality that they offer, you can right-click on that References node and then select Add Reference. This dialog box will allow you to reference another assembly. You can reference assemblies produced by other projects that are inside of your solution. We don't have any other projects, so this tab is blank when we look at it. You can reference COM components that are installed on your system. You can browse to an assembly if you know exactly where it's located on disk. And you can also look at the standard .NET assemblies that are installed on your machine. So there's Presentation Core, which is part of the Windows Presentation Foundation framework. Here are some assemblies for interacting with Microsoft Office, that is working inside of Office applications or automating Office applications. And you can see there's a huge number of assemblies listed inside of the Add Reference dialog. And you can click to sort them by name or by path. Typically, you'll want to sort them by name. And it's quite often that you want to go to one of the system assemblies to find functionality you're after. Those are the most popular assemblies. For instance, here's system.configuration for working with configuration files in .NET. System.directory services to talk to an LDAP server that might be on your network. Further down here, we'll find system.service model, which is part of Windows Communication Foundation, which allows you to build distributed applications. It is that Add Reference dialog then that is your gateway to functionality that's been built by Microsoft or built by other vendors or other teams that are inside your company. And as soon as you add a reference to that assembly in your project, you can begin using the APIs and the types that are defined inside of there.